is now 2025, so I just wanted to start off by saying Happy New Year. And the one thing that I really wanted to try out this year was making a YouTube channel. And of course that's going to be about books. What else would it be about? So I thought the first video would be great to talk about all the books that I read in 2024 and talk about like my reviews and ratings on each of them. So that's what I'm going to start out with today. So we started off the year really strong and I read Iron Flame. This is the second book in the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. This book is still following Violet and Xaden and their adventures after what happens in Fourth Wing. I was a little disappointed because for the majority of this book, Andarna is asleep. And like I get that she's a young dragon and she needs to sleep and grow like into her final form. So I understand that she needs to rest so she can grow, but I was a little disappointed that we didn't see much of her and that she was kind of like gone for most of the story. I will say we do learn a lot more about Xaden and his background in this book, which was really nice because for the majority of the first book we just really know about Violet and her history. One thing I was not expecting was Dain to step up and do what he did in this book. I'm not going to give it away because that's kind of like a surprising part, but I was surprised that he did that, and I'm sure a lot of people can agree with me. The ending of this book though had me wanting to throw this book at the wall. So if you're gonna read this, I would wait until probably closer to when Onyx Storm is coming out, which actually is coming out at the end of this month that I'm posting this video. But I read this at the beginning of 2024. And originally Onyx Storm was supposed to come out at the end of 2024. So I was like, oh, I won't have to wait that long. I can wait a few months, it's okay. And then it got pushed back to 2025. So here we are at the beginning of 2025. I have been seething about this ending since the beginning of 2024. It killed me inside. I did end up giving this book 4 stars. I did give Fourth Wing 5 stars just because I liked it a little bit more. I thought there was more substance to it, but I did really enjoy this one as well. I think there's a lot more politics in this one and that's why I didn't like it as much, but still overall one of my favorite books ever. So after that, I wanted to read the second book in the Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton, so I picked up Hunting Adeline. This is a dark romance, so make sure you check your trigger warnings before reading this. I will say that this book is a lot darker than the first book. So this book follows Addie and Zaid. Addie gets kidnapped at the end of the first book, and this book she wakes up with her captors. This is a really dark time for Addie, and a lot happens to her during the time that she's kidnapped because she is kidnapped by people who own like a sex slave ring. The only thing that really keeps her going is a journal that she finds from a girl named Molly who is talking about how she wants to escape and find a way out of this place, and her journal is hidden in the floorboards. So she finds that journal and that really gives her hope of like escaping, because after a while there's no more entries in the journal, so she assumed that Molly escaped. So again, some pretty horrible things happen to her, but she is able to finally escape, where Zaid finally finds her and brings her back home. And when she gets home, she finds that Zaid is living with Sibby, who we were introduced in the first book. And let me just say, Sibby is unhinged in the best way possible. She's so funny, and she's like, I don't even know how to describe it. She's just hilarious to me, and she's one of my favorite characters. So I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was really good. I also gave Haunting Adeline 4 stars. So I thought they were both very well matched. This one was just a lot darker. So naturally after that, I had to pick up Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. This is a dark romance reverse harem. And if you don't know what a verse harem means, it just means that she has multiple romantic partners. So she has 5 henchmen, as she likes to call them, which are basically her imaginary boyfriends. And there are some spicy scenes between her and her boyfriends. So as much as I love Sibby, I only gave this book 3 stars just because it wasn't very long. It didn't have as much detail as I thought the Cat and Mouse Duet did. So I did only give this 3 stars, but it still was a good book. So then we continued on with more dark romance, and I picked up The Ritual by Chantal Tessier, which is book 1 of the Lords series. This story follows Riot and Blakely. It is a story about this secret society within this college and they're called the Lords. And Riot is one of the Lords, and Blakely is supposed to be his chosen. And when you're chosen, you have to basically do whatever your lord tells you. You're there to serve him and submit to him and do whatever he wants. Riot is definitely a morally gray MMC. He is the touch her and die type of person. So after that, I took a little break from the dark romance because I felt like I read a lot of them all at once. And we moved on to a fantasy book. I read A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is book 5 of the ACOTAR series, which is the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. This story follows Nesta and Cassian. So I will admit, I hated Nesta in the first books. Absolutely despised her, could not stand her, just because I felt like she should have done more for her family, considering she's the oldest. So this book actually really changed my mind about her, because you get to know more about who she is and why that she is the way that she is. And I kind of started to love her after this book because she really changes as a person. The book starts out with her just being straight up being a bitch, if I'm being honest. She's drinking, spending all Feyre's money, and sleeping around with random men. Basically, they have an intervention for her, and she goes to stay at the House of Wind with Cassian and Azriel. And Cassian begins to train her because she's not, taking care of herself, and she needs to strengthen herself. So he starts to train her. And she's kind of a bitch to everybody. So the only friend that she really has is the House of Wind itself. And the house will bring her food and books and stuff to keep her happy. This is a found family, enemies to lovers, forced proximity book. I did give this 5 stars. This was my first 5-star read of the year. I absolutely loved this. Probably one of my favorite books of the series, even though I know I just said that I hated Nesta at first, but I think she makes such a big turnaround in this book that it quickly became my favorite. So then we moved back into dark romance, and I read the second book of the Lord series, which is The Sinner. This book follows Ellington and Easton, or as they call them, Ellie and Sin in the book. All the books in the Lords series are standalones, but they're all kind of interconnected, and some characters make appearances in other books. So I would really recommend reading them in the order that they are. All the books are also dual point of view. So you get the FMC and the MMC point of view, which is great. This one also has a little bit of stalker vibes in it, which always cool if you ask me. I did give this one 4 stars, just like I gave the first one. Next, we went on a little science fiction detour, and I read Vitro by Jessica Corey. This is actually the second book in the Corpus series by her, and I read the first one like a year ago. This is about a girl named Sophie who goes to an island where her mother was a scientist to try and find her mother and bring her back home, basically, and she recruits her childhood friend Jim to fly her to this island that nobody's supposed to be on. So she goes to find her mom and discovers that there's a lot going on this island that nobody really knows about, and they find that they're doing some scientific studies on people and creating beings with extraordinary abilities. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was pretty good. It had a good plot. It was interesting. It just wasn't great for me. So after that, I picked up the 3rd book in the Corpus series, which is Kalahari. They're on a safari tour with some students. Her dad goes away to find some supplies and leaves them there alone, but then he doesn't return. So Sarah, obviously growing up the way that she did, she knows how to prepare for this and how to survive, but they're running out of food and water and stuff that they need to survive in the desert, so they end up going to look for her father. And then they find an animal that's like kind of has this virus that is slowly taking over other animals around them. And the animals are being experimented on and have this virus that is highly contagious. You kind of learn about how this corporation that is making these animals and test subjects. I also gave this one 3 stars. Like I said, it was interesting, has a good plot, kept my attention. It just wasn't amazing for me. So then I moved on to the From Ash and Blood series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. These are the first 5 books in the series. We have book 1, From Blood and Ash, book 2, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, book 3, The Crown of Gilded Bones, book 4, The War of Two Queens, and book 5, A Soul of Ash and Blood. So we start out this series in From Blood and Ash, where you are introduced to Penelope, or as she is called in the book, Poppy. This is a story about vampires. So there's what they call the Ascended, which are the vampires, and the Craven are vampires that basically can't control their bloodlust. Poppy is what they call a Chosen, so she is supposed to ascend and become a vampire on a certain day. And because she is a Chosen, nobody is allowed to see what she looks like, so she has to wear a veil all the time covering her face, and she's only allowed to wear white, and she's kind of basically a prisoner. Poppy kind of rebels in her own way. She sneaks out at nighttime and goes around the town to visit certain places, and it's at this den, we'll call it a den, that Poppy meets Hawk, and they have a romantic night. They don't go all the way because they get interrupted, but they do get a little bit hot and heavy. And that is the first time that they meet. And then the next time they meet is when she finds out that he is going to be her new guard. So he ends up closely guarding her, escorting her to and from places, basically just keeping an eye on her. There's an attack on the palace that Poppy lives in, and she sneaks out in her mask and nightgown and basically is fighting against the Craven. And nobody knows that the maiden is out there. And so he's supposed to escort her to the capital, basically, and keep her safe from any more attacks that happen on the road. But instead of taking her to the capital, he takes her back to his hometown, where she learns that maybe the Ascended are the bad guys, and the guys that she was always taught were the bad guys are the good guys. I don't want to give too much away in these other books, so I'm just going to tell you about the first one to see if you guys are interested in reading it or not. So it starts out kind of insta-love because they have that initial attraction and they have that first night in the den. And she doesn't think that he knows who she is, but he does know who she is. And as it progresses and she learns about him, they kind of turn to enemies. So I guess it is kind of an enemies to lovers trope, but they were kind of lovers before the enemies part and then go back to lovers after. So your emotions are kind of all over the place in this series, but definitely one of my favorite series of the year. This is probably number 3 on my favorite series for the year. And number 1 would be the ACOTAR series. So I did give From Blood and Ash, I gave this one 4 stars. It was good, but not my favorite of all of them. The second book, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, I gave this one 5 stars because this one was my favorite of them. Everything kind of comes together in this book, and your questions start to get answered and it starts to make more sense to you. So I think this one was really the best one out of all of them. The Crown of Gilded Bones, I gave 4 stars. The War of Two Queens, I gave 4 stars. And A Soul of Blood and Ash, I gave 4 stars. So almost all the books in this series were 4 stars except for the Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which I gave 5 stars. And so I did read that series along with her other series, which is the Flesh and Fire series, also by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I read them simultaneously according to a guide that I found online that said which ones to read and in which order. The first book is A Shadow in the Ember. The second book is A Light in the Flame. And the third book is A Fire in the Flesh. This series is the prequel series to Blood and Ash. So this happens before Blood and Ash. So this series is about a girl named Seraphina, or as she's called in the book, Sarah, and she has been raised and trained her entire life to become the wife or the consort of the Primal of Death. So the Primal of Death rules over the Shadowlands, and we have ourselves a Shadow Daddy. So Nyktos is, I'm in love with him. It's straight and simple, I'm in love with him. So the day comes where he's supposed to come collect her as his consort, and he doesn't show up. So she's panicking because she doesn't understand why he didn't show up, and her family is blaming her, thinking that she did something wrong, and that's why he didn't come to collect her. But when she is put into danger by her own family, he comes to save her. So he brings her to the Shadowlands where she lives at his home, and it's kind of part of the forced proximity trope because he tries really hard to resist her, but there definitely is an attraction between them. And there is one thing that I want to tell you in this book, and if this doesn't convince you to read this series, I have no idea what will. So as we have established, Nyktos is a shadow daddy. He uses his shadows in this book to please her. I think that is enough said. Read it.
I gave a shadow in the ember 5 stars, I gave a light in the flame 5 stars, and I gave a fire in the flesh 5 stars.
So then I went back into dark romance and I read the 3rd book of the Lorde series, which is The Sacrifice. This story follows Tyson and Laken, and I think Tyson is probably my favorite one of the Lordes. Just, I don't know what it is about him, but that man, something about that man. So on her wedding day, she is supposed to marry another man. At her wedding day, he shows up and says, no, you're not gonna marry him, you're gonna marry me instead. And she can't say no because, like we said in the 1st book, she is a chosen, so she does what she's told. And so at her wedding, her dad tells her, like, you're not marrying this guy, you're gonna marry this guy Tyson instead. And they get married and consummate their marriage on the pillar in front of everybody. And so I gave this one also 4 stars like I gave the other ones. Then I continued with the dark romance and we moved on to Sabotage, which is book 4 of the Lorde series. Make sure you check your trigger warnings on every one of these books just to make sure that this is something that you would be interested in. But this book, Sabotage, follows Rayleigh and Colton, who happen to be step-siblings. There's a lot of tension and anger associated with them. Very, very toxic, but still a good story. I gave this one also 4 stars. So then I moved on to a read that I decided to do with a couple of my friends. I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangyu Manna. Don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm so sorry if I'm not. The long title alone made me kind of not like this book. Like, why is that so hard to say? The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Okay. So this young witch gets a call from this private school and they want her to come teach these other young witches that they have at the school. So she agrees. She goes to the school and helps teach them, gain control over their magic. This is on the Grumpy Sunshine trope slow burn romance because there is a little bit of romance in it between her and another one of the teachers at the school. I unfortunately only gave this book 2 stars. It was not a bad read. That is not why I rated it so low. I just personally was bored. Like, it wasn't that exciting for me. There wasn't anything crazy that happened. It was like a cute little wholesome book. And as we can tell by the books that I have talked about so far, I am not a cute little wholesome girly. So this book was just a little bit boring to me. That's why I only gave it 2 stars. Again, it wasn't bad. There wasn't bad writing. It wasn't a bad plot. It just was a little boring. So then I switched back to fantasy romance with Taming the White Wolf by N.J. Walters. So as I'm sure you can tell by the title, this is about a man that can shift into a wolf, Devlin, and his love interest, Zoe. So they meet by chance. They try to stay away from each other, can't really resist the pull, and then they find out that they are basically fated mates. This is the first book in the Lone Wolf Legacy. There's 3 books in the series, and they're all standalones, but characters do make appearances in other books from what I've read, and they're all interconnected. I've only read the first book so far. I do plan to read the other 2, I just haven't gotten there yet. But I did give this one 3 stars. The spice was hot. It was a good read. The plot was good. Like, there's a little bit of mystery. Like, they go on a little bit of an adventure. It was a good read. And then I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is also a book that I read with some of my friends because I was told it was a decent read. I also only gave this book 2 stars. This was not because the writing itself was bad. I was just, again, pretty bored with this. This is a story about a Hollywood star named Evelyn Hugo who, over the course of her life, has had 7 husbands. She has never talked about why her marriages ended or why they left her or anything like that. It's all been kind of a secret, and she's never really had like any interviews discussing her life. She always turned everybody down until one day she requests to be interviewed by a young lady named Monique, and her supervisor says, look, I have more experienced people available. Are you sure you don't want someone else? She says, no, it has to be Monique. So Monique goes over to her house over the course of a few months and interviews her and learns about her past and starts to write a book detailing her life. She writes her life story. In this book, there is a little twist as to why Evelyn specifically wanted her to write the story. And it wasn't a twist for me. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. That's it? Like, that's what this all was about? It wasn't that much of a twist for me. It was all right, but it wasn't great. So that is why I gave this 2 stars. So then I switched back over to dark romance again, and I read The Web of Silence Duet by Lee Rivers. I saw these recommended all over TikTok. I saw these recommended all over TikTok. And let me just say, you guys are some little freaks because, oh my god, I was not prepared for this. This is a dark romance. Check trigger warnings. I'm serious. Talking to you. Check your trigger warnings because, oh my god. This story follows Malachi and Olivia, who are adopted siblings. Malachi was adopted by Olivia's family and brought in when he was, I think, 7. I think that's the age that he was brought in. And he went through such a traumatizing past that he is mute by choice. So he doesn't talk to anybody and he chooses to communicate through sign language. But he doesn't talk to anybody except for Olivia. So he does talk to her, just not as much as you or I would talk to somebody. He mostly communicates through sign language, but he does talk to her occasionally. And let me just say, he is unhinged. He is a psychopath to the highest degree. And reading his point of view was crazy. And I am told that the audiobook is insane. So if you're really into audiobooks, I heard that the person who voiced Malachi was so spot on and made the audiobook amazing. I wanted to go back and listen to the audiobook. I just haven't had a chance to yet, but I heard that it's really good. So if you're into audiobooks, check it out. I mean, the writing of just his inner thoughts and was enough to be like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? It was insane. Unhinged to the highest degree, psychopath, like touch her and you will die type. And at one point they have sex over their father's injured body, and he's like kind of slowly slipping away, and they're having sex over the body. So yeah, again, trigger warnings. If that's not something you're into, do not read it. He ends up going to jail because of that, because he's the one who injured their father. And she testifies and basically seals his prison sentence. In the second book, he gets out of prison. And he stalks her for a long time after he's out of prison. And she doesn't know that he's, like, she has no idea. He doesn't make his presence known. And the second book is very heavy on the revenge trope because he wants revenge on her sending him to jail. So I gave both of these 4 stars. They were very, very dark on the dark romance scale, but I still enjoyed them. Then I moved on to a thriller, and I read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I read this entire book in less than a day, like maybe 3 hours. I don't even remember how long it took me. Like a few hours it took me to read this entire thing. And I was so captivated by this book. It's not even funny. Like, this should have been a 5-star read for me, but I did not like it more than my other 5-star reads, so I just couldn't bring myself to give it 5 stars. So I did give this 4.5 stars. So this is a story about a girl who goes missing when she's 15. Her name is Ellie, and she goes missing. And the story is told through multiple point of views. So you get her point of view, her mom's point of view, the mom's new boyfriend, and her captor. I don't want to give too much away, but during this book, I was convinced I knew what happened. And then at the end, I was completely thrown for a loop. Like, I was convinced, I was like, oh, this has to be what the twist is. This is gonna be what happens. I knew it was this person. And then I was so wrong, and it was so much more fucked up than I thought it was gonna be. And I was like, I couldn't put it down. I just couldn't put it down. It was so good. 4.5 stars. So then we switched back into my favorite genre, which is fantasy, and we read The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. This book was cute. It wasn't great, but it was cute. I gave it 3.5 stars. This story follows Marigold, who is a honey witch. So she harvests honey from bees, and she can infuse them with certain plants and herbs to like create cures and healing serums and stuff like that. This is a grumpy sunshine trope, and it is LGBT. So then I switched back to dark romance, and I read Where's Molly by H.D. Carlton. So you remember when I was telling you about hunting Adeline, and I told you about the journal that she found with a girl named Molly? This is the story of what happened after Molly escaped, and she did escape from the captors as well as Addie did, with a little bit of help. She ends up on a secluded farm on the outskirts of town where she has a pig farm, and she unalives people and feeds them to her pigs. So if you ever need to get rid of a body, I'm just kidding, FBI, I'm just kidding, it was the book. So I gave this book 4 stars. It was short, but it was kind of like, I think, the happy ending that she needed after what happened to her during her time being held captive. So then it was fall time, and I wanted to switch to something more cute and cozy. So I've read the first 2 books in the Dream Harbor series by Laurie Gilmore. So that is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe and The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. These were really cute and cozy. Like, if you want a cute, cozy read, this is definitely something that I would recommend. They are both romances with a little bit of mystery sprinkled in them, which was really great. The Pumpkin Spice Cafe is the first book, and it is definitely the grumpy sunshine trope. We have Jeannie, who just moves to live in Dream Harbor because she takes over her aunt's coffee shop. And then we have Logan, the grumpy farmer who delivers produce for her. And she kind of hears some strange noises in the night, and he kind of offers to help her with that. And so they go on like this little mystery hunt to see what's making all that noise. And they end up kind of forming a little connection during that. And really cute, really cozy, definitely great to read in the fall time. And I gave this one 4 stars. The second one in the series is The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. This one follows Hazel and Noah. Hazel works at the bookstore that is down the road from Jeannie's coffee shop. And Noah is a fisherman who does tours. This is an opposites attract small town romance where he falls first. And again, I gave them both 4 stars. Then I moved on to a paranormal dark romance. So when I read the back of this book, I was expecting one thing. And then I read the book and I got something different. I will admit I was very confused during this book for the most part, but I think that's kind of like the point. Like, you're supposed to be a little bit confused and then slowly start putting the pieces together and figuring it out. It just was not at all what I was expecting, and I was kind of like a little thrown for a loop. So I did give this 3 stars. So then I read the 3rd book in the Dream Harbor series, which is The Christmas Tree Farm. This story follows Kira and Bennett. It is also on the grumpy sunshine trope, but she is the grumpy one and he is the sunshine one. So Kira moves to town and buys the old Christmas tree farm. And being a small town, it is notorious for everyone going to this Christmas tree farm to get their Christmas trees. And Kira announces that she's not really looking to open it this year, as she's just moving in and getting her bearings. And the town is kind of a little disappointed by this, and she ends up realizing that the old farmhouse needs more work than she thought it did, so she needs more money, and she decides to open the Christmas tree farm kind of last minute. So she is rushing to get everything done and enlists the help of Bennett, and they start to form a connection over their shared time together. Very cute, loved it, definitely great for Christmas time. I gave it 4 stars. So by this time it was officially Christmas time, and I was on my Christmas reading binge. So the next one I read is The Christmas Fix by Lucy Score. So this cover looks very inconspicuous, doesn't it? I thought so too. I thought this was just gonna be a cute little Christmas book about Christmas love. This was spicy as hell. Very spicy, a lot spicier than I was expecting, because I did not read the back of this book when I purchased it. It showed up in my recommendeds when I was checking out on Amazon, and I was like, you know what, that looks really cute, snowflakes, adorable, add to cart, purchase, without even reading it. And then when I went to read the book, I also didn't read the back of it, so I went into this very blind, and I was not expecting this much spice. My friend told me that they knew it was going to be spicy because of this author. She writes a lot of spicy content, I guess, but I had no idea. This story follows Catalina, who is a TV star and has her own renovating show where she renovates houses, and she goes to this little town that is called Mary, Connecticut, which has been recently destroyed by a hurricane. And the town manager, Noah, refuses her offer to help him rebuild the town in time for Christmas, which is their greatest tourist attraction. And she offers to help him rebuild the entire town and film a TV show there while she's doing it, and he refuses because he doesn't want his town to become a spectacle. And they discover that they have an attraction for each other. So very cute. I gave this 4 stars. And then I read The Santa Suit by Mary Kay Andrews. This was pretty short, like it's pretty small. It was a very cute read about Ivy. She goes and buys this little farmhouse sight unseen because she wants to drastically change her life. And in the closet, she discovers a Santa suit. Really old, handmade, nice Santa suit. And she realizes that it's so nice, it needs to be shared. And so she and a friend go on to play Santa and Mrs. Claus and bring happiness to the town. This was a cute little book. I gave it 3 stars. Very Christmassy read. Very cute. So I was getting a little bored with all the extreme Christmas cheer. So I read Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. Still very wintry theme, as we've seen, but just not that extremely intense, Christmassy, happy, cheery vibe. So this is a story about a couple, Krista and Kiernan, who are going on this little wintry retreat up into the mountains. An unexpected snowstorm rolls in and strands their little bus with all the people that have showed up on this little tour with them. So all of them, including the bus driver, leave the bus for some reason. If there's a snowstorm, I would not leave the bus, but they all leave and start looking to get a little bit of cell reception. And then Kiernan and Krista get separated from the others and end up falling over a cliff in the wintertime in a snowstorm. She falls and has to dig her way out of the deep snow, can't find her boyfriend, is fighting frostbite as she wanders around trying to find where everybody else went, because by this time the snowstorm is really bad. She ends up finding her way back to the others, who are holed up in a little abandoned cabin. And so they all find shelter there, get warm. She suffered frostbite to her hand because she lost her mitten when she fell, because her boyfriend was holding on to it to try and pull her up, but she slipped out of her mitten. So her hand has frostbite and she gets patched up, but she's not really able to feel or use her hand because it is severely frostbit. They go out looking for her boyfriend, but they never end up finding him, so he's assumed to be dead. And then one by one, people start getting murdered, and they're all becoming increasingly more suspicious of each other because no one knows who's doing it. They have no clue. Everyone just keeps getting picked off randomly one by one, and nobody sees anything. This is another book that I read all in one day, like not even a day, less than a day, a few hours it took me to read this because I could not put it down. Every point in this book, I thought I knew who the murderer was, and then it turned out that it wasn't them. So like I thought it was one person, that person gets killed off. I thought it was this person, that person gets killed off. And then at the end, there was such a massive twist. I think I sat there in silence for like 2 minutes. I was like, you're joking. There's no way. There was a way, and it was done. And so this book, highly recommend. If you like thrillers, read this one, because this one blew my mind. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This was almost a 5-star read, but just like the other thriller I read, what was it? Then She Was Gone. I just didn't love it more than my 5-star reads from the beginning of the year, so I couldn't give it 5 stars. But this one was a very close 4.5 for me. And then I finished off the year with A Merry Little Meet Cute by Julie Murphy and Sierra Simone. This is another book that I purchased without reading anything about, and I didn't read it before I started it either. It was another one that was recommended to me when I was checking out on Amazon, so of course I was like, yes, plus size FMC, of course I'm gonna get this. Christmassy vibe? Hell yeah. So I got this, and I started reading this, and it is about B. Hobbs, who is a plus size adult film star, and a former boy band member, Nolan. They are co-stars on this cute little Christmas movie that is being filmed in Christmas Notch, Vermont. And he is trying to get rid of his bad boy image. And so the one rule that they were both told by their managers was no sex. So this was actually very spicy. Was not expecting that. Very good book. I gave this one 3 stars. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Those are my 34 books that I read this year. I'm hoping to read 50 books in 2025, so hopefully I will have some more videos for you about that. But anyway, thank you for watching. Bye!